Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
We are discussing scope of social policy. Earlier, we have in our earlier sessions, we have mentioned or we have discussed that scope of social policy follows from the theoretical position to which a particular state subscribes to. Now, we'll see how, depending on a theoretical position, a particular state may arrive at a one type of analysis of a social problem, and consequently the state will have one type of solution for that problem. So, what we will try to show in this session, that how, depending on a theoretical position of a particular state, same problem may be tackled differently by different states. Supposing there is a problem of poverty or problem of illiteracy or problem of malnutrition in different states. Okay. Now, what type of analysis the state will adopt for the cause of this problem, that would depend on the type of policy or type of theoretical position that particular state subscribes to, and accordingly that particular state will formulate policies. Now, today now we will be discussing, thus we will be discussing an explanatory account of different welfare perspectives. Now, first let us see how anti-collectivism will have how anti-collectivism will explain social problem. Like what anti-collectivist assumes, assumption of anti-collectivist is that if an individual is given freedom, that individual can stand on his or her own feet. Now, so when that is the assumption, now what happens when it is found that, say, particularly some people are poor in a particular state. So, what will be the analysis of anti-collectivist? Their analysis or their understanding will be that this particular person, if someone is poor, then that person there may be some deficiency with that person. It is because of that deficiency or inefficiency of that person, this person is poor. Okay. If someone remains illiterate, this is because the problem with that individual, because this theory believes or follows individualism. So they will arrive that their conclusion will be this problem of poverty or problem of illiteracy or some other problem that is observed. This problem is due to the inadequacy in the individual. Okay. So naturally, so that will be individual failure or inadequacy. So naturally, state need not do anything there. State has very little to do there. State will not try to provide employment or other. If someone is unemployed, state will not provide do anything to provide employment to that particular person, because here assumption is that it is this person can become employed through individual action. Like, say, for instance, in our country we have, say, right to work, in the sense that we have employment guarantee scheme. Now, under employment guarantee scheme, if someone is unemployed, one can get employment for 100 days, if you wish to. Now, here state is guaranteeing employment for certain period, like for 100 days, Now, because here our assumption is that it is the failure of the state, it is not that something wrong with the individual, it is failure of the state, hence it is the responsibility of the state to provide employment. But if we but an anti-collectivist analysis will be, no, if someone is not able to get employment, that means that there is some problem with that person, and because of that he remains unemployed. Hence, state need not do anything there. It is the individual who has to take initiative or to get an employment. Okay. So, so unemployment problem can be solved through individuals' action, So, that is how. So, you see how policy, what is the cause of a problem and what is the solution and what policy has to be taken, all these follows from a particular theory to which a particular state subscribes to. Now, let us look at the other theoretical standpoint which we are discussing, that is non-socialist welfare collectivism. Let us see how non-socialist welfare collectivism, they will look at the same problem. Say, supposing there is a problem of someone is unemployed, someone is poor. Okay. Now, what non-socialist welfare collectivist would say, that if someone is poor, why he is poor, because their argument is capitalism is just system, capitalism is correct. Okay, that is what their argument. But they say, that even capitalism may go wrong sometime. There may be capitalism may be dysfunctional sometime, and because of that, some people may remain unemployed for some time. So, that means it is the dysfunction of the economy, that is why a person may not able to get employment. They would argue that, okay, maybe that individual lacks efficiency, that a particular individual may not have efficiency, that may be the reason why a person is remaining unemployed, or why a person is remaining uneducated. Maybe there is lack of individual initiative, but sometimes the situation may be beyond the control of that individual person. It may be also due to the failure of capitalism, okay, or failure of the economy. So, then what is the solution? So they say that solution would come through collective commitment to national interest. That means, like say for instance, if someone remains illiterate, or if someone remains unemployed, state would argue, or state will take a stand that in our country no one should remain illiterate. Okay, whatever may be the reason, it may be due to the individual failure, or it may be due to the failure of the economy, but the state will have a commitment to see to it that everybody get employed, everybody get educated. Hence, state will accordingly take that type of action. Through that type of action, they will state will try to tackle the problem of social problem that the state faces. Say maybe it may be a problem of unemployment, it may be a problem of illiteracy, etc. I am just taking the example of these two problems, And what is the method? Method is idealist. It is not ideal. Like the standpoint is that ideally the state accepts this idea that everybody, should get employment, everybody should be educated, and accordingly state to try to promote that idea. So, it is a method is idealist method, it is not structural or not individualistic, you know. Now the next thing, next theoretical position that we will be discussing, that will look into is the Fabian socialist. Okay, how Fabian socialist will explain social problem. What is the assumption of Fabian socialism? Fabian socialism, they say that capitalism itself is wrong. Capitalism creates lot of inequality in the society. Okay, and because capitalism results into some sort of inequality, some will be rich, some will be poor. So, poverty may result due to the inequality which results from, which follows from the functioning of capitalist economy. So, then if that is so, then what is the solution? Solution is in this, that we should try to do away with the inequality. Like Fabian socialist, they argue in favor of equality, equal opportunity to everybody. They said that we should try to set up a just society, and for them justice means equality. That means in general, often by justice we mean equality. So, the Fabian socialist would say that as capitalism sometimes or most of the time creates inequality, that is why maybe some people may not get employment, some people may remain poor, some people may remain illiterate. So, what is needed, how this problem can be solved, if we can do away with this inequality, and this may also result due to maladministration of the welfare state. Welfare state failed to solve this problem of unemployment, poverty, etc., etc. That is why the state, it is the responsibility of the state to see to it that everybody gets education, nobody remains hungry, etc., etc. So, here the responsibility is to the state. Now how state will do this? State will do this by fostering collectivist and moral values of equality, fraternity, and altruism. Actually, everybody should in this particular state, everybody should believe in the values of equality. You know, that is if state will try to promote the values of inequality, and when states can promote the values of inequality, state will be able to adapt that type of legislation and can formulate that type of policy. Like state will say, state would try to spread the values of equality, that everybody should get educated, everybody should get proper nutrition, etc., etc. And when state will try to propagate that, and when the majority of the citizens they feel that way, then it is possible, because what Fabian socialists does, they try to promote change in the society through legislation. So, then they will be able to pass a legislation and implement that. Like say for instance, Fabian socialist would say that actually equality is important. So, for promoting equality, we should have land redistribution. Okay, so that means if we want to that means we have to acquire land, those who have land above a particular ceiling which state decides. They should state will decide that no individual should have land more than a certain amount, and all those who have land above that amount, that land should be collected by the state and should be given to the landless, and some sort of inequality will come in the society. Now, for passing that type of legislation, majority of the people should believe in this type of values, then only state will be able to pass this type of legislation and implement that. And here also the method is idealist, because state believes in the, or Fabian socialists believe in the in the ideology of equality. They believe in the ideology of equality, and then they try to promote that ideology. Now let us look at radical social administration. How radical social administration will look at this type of look at various social problems, and what type of policy suggestion they would suggest. Radical social administration, what is their analysis? They say that what are the social problems that we have, the social problems are caused due to the economic structure of the society. Their analysis is that as there is inequality in the society, where some people have more property and some people have less property, etc., etc. Some people are rich, some people are poor, or in the or the type of economic structure that we have, which is characterized by inequality. That is why we have this problem. Okay. So what has to be done? They would say that firstly we have to change this structure. So change this structure, that means the type of distribution of property that we have, that has to be changed. That those who have more property, that has to be collected by the state by maybe through legislation, like through radical state action. The difference between Fabian socialist and radical social administration is that whereas Fabian socialists they think that gradually we can transform a society based on inequality to equality through various type of legislation, passing various type of legislation, like say a legislation for progressive taxation, a legislation for land ceiling, etc., etc. Okay, but that has to be done through legislation. But Fabian socialists, their argument is that actually it is very difficult to do that, because those who have more power, they will always influence policy making, and they will not allow the state to pass a legislation that would affect the interest of the powerful section who have more economic power. So their argument is that to start with, state should take radical action to take away economic power of those who are more powerful. Then only it will be possible to bring equality in the society. So their method is idealist, and as also as structuralist, because they believe in a structural analysis. They say that structure of the society or economic distribution, economic or property distribution in the society has to be changed to start with. That is important. And they also believe in idealism, because they say that people should agree that we should have a society based on equality, and which can be done through radical state action. Okay. So they believe in idealist, their method is idealist as well as structuralist. Accordingly, they will formulate policy for solving this problem of inequality, or problem of poverty, problem of illiteracy, etc. So whatever problem that we have. Now let us look at political economy of welfare. Now political economy of welfare, how political economy of welfare will look at, or in other words the Marxist analysis, how they look at this problem. Okay. They say the problem that we have in the society is due to the conflicting interest between the working class needs and capitalist needs. The capitalist class, according to the Marxist analysis or political economy of welfare analysis, the capitalist class will always try to maximize profit. Now, how they will maximize profit? They will try to maximize profit by misappropriating the surplus value which is produced by the workers. Okay. So, goal of capitalist class is to profit maximization. Okay. On the other hand, the working class, those who are exploited, they will become organized and they will try to get more wages that they claim due to them, because according to their analysis that they produce the surplus value and it is the capitalist class which is misappropriating the surplus value. So, they should get their due, and accordingly the working class will organize and they will start or they will engage in class struggle in claiming higher higher wages, higher payment for the work they do. So, there will be constant conflict, and whatever problem that will have in a particular society, it would depends on the progress of class struggle. Like say for instance, if working class become more successful in asserting their rights, they will get better terms and conditions in the work. So, there will be less poverty. But if capitalist class is more powerful, they will be able to give less to the workers, hence there may be more problem of poverty, illiteracy, etc., etc. So, according to their analysis, that whatever problem that we have, it depends on the class struggle. Now, how change can be according to their analysis, how we can bring a change? Change can be affected by class struggles to change economic production resulting from conflict between capital and labor. Okay. Now, actually, so they say that actually the change will come through class struggle, like it is through like they'll say that if workers are given more power, if workers are more organized, they will be able to better their economic condition, and that is what is the solution. So, change will come only through class struggle. And what is the method they talk about? Their method is structuralist as well as materialist. In this analysis, they believe that whatever happens in the society or whatever structure, whatever is the economic mode of production, that determines everything. That means they say that so long as capitalist class has more economic power, workers will not be able to have better terms and conditions, better quality of life. Okay. So, what is required that actually progress of class struggle, so that structure of the society is changed. So, they say ultimately through class struggle the structure of the society has to be changed, then only social problem can be solved. So this will come through, so change will come through class struggle. Okay. Now, actually what we did so far, like what we are doing, we were discussing in the last few sessions, we were discussing the scope of social policy. Okay. Now, while discussing the scope of social policy, we have said that scope of social policy depends on a theoretical position to which a particular state subscribes to. Okay. Now, whatever the problem are there in the society at a particular point of time, now those problems, what has caused those problems, what is the solution of that problem, what type of policy we should adopt for solving this problem, all these will follow from the political understanding of a particular state at that point of time. And here it is important to I would like to mention that actually it is not that throughout state we will have a same political position. A state may have at one point of time state may subscribe to one type of political position, and another point of time there may be a slightly shift in that political position. And interestingly, in our country, if you look in our country, we have several states or several provinces. Okay, now in several provinces there are various political parties are in power. Okay? Now what happens, depending on the political party which comes to power, they will take a type of policy to solve the problem of inequality or solve the problem of poverty, etc., etc. Like for instance, let me give one example. Like for instance, in the state of West Bengal, for instance, there was a left front government for quite some time. Okay, now when left front government was there in the state of West Bengal, now so now what was their approach in solving the problem of poverty? Like you'd see that some of the solution or some of the policy that they formulated, those policies followed from say some sort of Marxist analysis. Like for example, what they say, the one policy standpoint, they took the land to the tiller. As you know, in our country, big landlords, what they do, they lease out lot of their land to other people, to agricultural laborers to till their land, and they collect rain from them. Okay, now and this is an exploitative relationship. The landowners, the amount landowners claim from the actual tillers sometimes is quite high, and that is how the tillers or the actual those who till the land, they remain poor. So so the approach of the left front government in West Bengal was that one of the reasons of poverty in the rural area is this exploitative relationship. Okay, so that was their analysis. So if that is the analysis, then what is the solution? They took a policy that land to the tiller. They said that those who till the land, they will be given the permanent right. That means if someone he has leased in some land, and so long as he will be tilling that land, the land would belong to him. Okay, so this way they wanted to secure the right of the tillers to solve the problem of poverty. So this is just one example how even and this was also the case in a state like Kerala, where there was a left front government for some time. So you see, but this may not be this type of approach may not be followed by some other states, because those states may have some other political party which may subscribe to a different type of ideology, which is not a Marxist ideology. So they will have some other type of solution for poverty. Like say for example, now central government has taken a policy of employment guarantee for solving the problem of poverty. So that is from another, the assumption is that here the state failed to provide employment to the agricultural laborers or to the poor. Hence it is the responsibility of the state to provide that employment. Hence thus poor people can ask for employment, and it will be duty of the state to provide them that employment. So you see, social policy, what will be the policy, what will be the solution, all these follows from the theoretical stand that a particular state takes at a particular point of time. Now we will try to get an idea about social policy framework of India as well as social policy framework of most of the countries of the world. Like, when you talk about social policy or when you talk about social development, what type of problem that we refer to, what type of problem that comes to our mind, or what type of problem, solution of what type of problem we agree upon. Okay, so we will try to get an idea that in our country what type of social problem or socio-economic problem we consider as important, and what type of problem we try to solve. That is one thing. Okay, now for getting this some idea of this social policy framework of our country, we have to the problem is actually there is no one document where all social policy framework is written in black and white. There are several documents which will give us an idea about the social policy framework of our country. For instance, the Constitution of India. Constitution of India is one document from which we can get an idea about social policy framework of our country, or say planning commission documents, or say Niti Aayog's policy, etc., etc. And this type of many policy documents are there which will give us an idea of social policy framework of our country. Okay. Now, it is not possible for us to look into all these documents. So, what I'll do, I'll just refer to some important part of from this document. For example, I will discuss the directive principles of state policy from our constitution, and from that we will try to get an idea about what social policy framework we have tried to follow in our country. What is the social policy framework of our country? We can get some rough idea from directive principles of state policy. That is one source, one document. Okay, but actually when we talk about social policy framework, actually our social policy framework is influenced also by the world body, by United Nations. United Nations, fortunately United Nations, all the member states of United Nations, they have agreed on a social policy framework. Like for instance, when all the countries of the world, when we entered the new millennium, that time actually the member states, they framed a social policy framework which is known as Millennium Development Goals. So countries of the world, they agreed on certain goals which all member states should try to attain, and actually it was said that time that by 2015 all the countries of the world should try to attain these goals. Now 2015 is over. After that, again member states of the United Nations, they have agreed upon or they have created another document which is known as Sustainable Developmental Goals. So another document has been produced, and these documents also give an idea that what type of goal we try all the member states will try to attain, and it has been said in this document that by 2013 these are the goals all the member states of the United Nations will try to achieve. Now, as a member state, these documents has some influence in our country. So that is why we will discuss the social policy framework in our country in the light of these documents also. Okay, but apart from that, there is another important document which is very important to get an idea of social policy framework in our country, is that in the year 1991 one very important change has taken place in our country. From the year when we became independent, that time we were committed to a socialist economy. Okay, and from 1950 to 1990, more or less our economy were committed to socialism. Of course, there was some shift in the policy from time to time, but from the 1990 we have adopted new economic policy that we from there we have adopted a policy of market orientation, which is from socialistic orientation we are moved to a capitalist orientation. So, that is a very important change. So, on the one hand we have a commitment, we had a commitment to socialism, and but then in 1991 we have adopted some change towards which is market oriented change in the economy, which is taking us towards a capitalist economy. So, this is one very important document to get an idea about the framework, social policy framework of our country. So, now what we'll do, we'll try to understand the social policy framework of our country by briefly discussing these documents, how that happened, like what is reflected about social policy stand in our country, as well as what is the agreement that we have internationally or globally, what most of the member state has assumed that these are important in social policy agenda for the human civilization or for the world. Okay. Now, let us first go to the directive principles of state policy. Okay. Now, directive principles of state policy. Now, let me say a few words about directive principles. In our constitution there is one chapter which is called directive principles of state policy. Now, these directive principles of state policy actually, strictly speaking, it is not part of the constitution, in the sense that it cannot be enforced by in the court. Now, then what is the importance of directive principles of state policy? What happened, when we were framing our constitution, the founder of our founding fathers of our constitution, now they thought that some of the things which are very important for our country, all citizens of our country, for instance, they thought that everybody must have education in our country. They thought that everybody should have at least some level of say elementary education or primary education. Every citizen of India or every children of India should have elementary education. That is most desirable. Okay. So, that was the vision that was agreed by the founding fathers of our constitution. But problem was, when we got independence, we were a very poor country. Now, at that point of time, if we wanted to implement that would have meant that we should be able to open thousands of schools throughout the country. Now, that was beyond the economic capacity, or we didn't have that type of resources. So, that does not mean that this is not important. So, then what now it was failed by the founding fathers of constitution that right to education is very important for a country, but as at that point of time it was not possible to ensure right to education to all citizens, but we must mention that somewhere in our constitution that this is important, and policymakers of our country should remember this, and always they should try to implement frame policy to implement this. So, that is how. So, they wanted to give a directives to the policymakers that policymakers should keep this in mind, that some of the goals which was considered as important but which was beyond the capacity of the state to implement those at that point of time. But policymakers should try to frame policies so that we can implement those goals in our country. So that is how directive principles of state policy was created, and it mentioned about some of the important goals. So what we'll do, we look at some of the important, we will not go through all the directive principles, we should look at some of the important points that was mentioned in the directive principles. Like for instance, it was said that goal of the society is to promote justice, social, economic and political. Now what is the meaning of this? Promote justice, social, economic, political. By justice it was meant that to promote equality. That means states should try to promote social, economic and political equality for everybody or every citizen of our country. Okay, that was one thing it was thought is very important. States should try to do that, and that was the directives were given to the policymakers. Then another directives we have in the directive principles of state policy is the ownership and control of the material resources to subserve common good. That means, actually material resources were maybe owned privately, and when huge material resources are owned privately, then it may not serve the interest of the society. If it is owned privately, huge material resources are owned privately, it will serve the private interest. Okay, so it was said that ownership and control of material resources should, that should serve common good. Okay, like for instance, we had some parts of our country something called a zamindari system. Now under zamindari system, the zamindars or a type of land, they had all control over land, and they used to collect rent from that land, and they used to own the fruits of the labor of the farmers, and they used to collect the rent, and they used to that was used in their interest. So that was not serving common good. Hence after independence we state formulated policy whereby zamindari system was abolished, and that was one of the that was in line with the directives of to use material resources or for the interest of the common good. Then similarly it is mentioned in the directive that concentration of wealth to be prevented. Wealth should not get concentrated in fewer hands. Hence government should take various policies so that this can be prevented. And actually land ceiling in the rural area or urban land ceiling, this type of legislation was formulated keeping these directives in mind. Okay, and it was said that equal pay for women and men and living wage salary for the workers. Actually there is a lot of disparity there. There was a lot of disparity. Even today that type of disparity is there. Wages among men and women, usually men get higher wages than women for the similar type of work, or sometimes the type of wage that is given to the workers which is not enough for maintaining their existence or day to day life. So it was said that actually the two things has to be done. Firstly, states policies should be framed so that men and women get equal wage for same work or equal work. Okay, and living wage to the workers, and that is how we have following that directives, we have something called minimum wage act, that minimum some amount of wage has to be given to all workers. This is actually this has been done following this type of directives: securing right to work, unemployment, old age, sickness assistance, securing human condition of work. It was thought that everybody should have right to work. Everybody should have right to work. Now, at that point of time, we got independence. It was not possible to ensure employment to everybody. So, nobody should remain unemployed. Or now, secondly, in old age, people should get some sort of assistance. When someone is sick, someone should get some sort of assistance. And working condition, workers should get better working condition in the work. Okay. Now, this is one important directives given to the policymakers, that policymakers should try to see that no one remain unemployed. Everybody should have some sort of security or right to work. So now you will find in our country we have employment guarantee scheme, which is to some extent has ensured employment for at least 100 days to those who remain unemployed or unemployed poor. Similarly, we have some schemes for giving pension for the old age, even to the agricultural laborers or things like that. And there are many attempts made to secure human condition, to improve working condition. So these were the directives which were given to the policymakers, and actually policymakers though it took long time, but policymakers are framing policy to implement or promote some of these directive principles. Okay. Now, another directive was free and compulsory education until age 14 years. As I mentioned, that it was felt by the policymakers that everybody should get education up to certain level. So up to certain minimum level, everybody must have some education. So, and that should be free and compulsory. The state should be able to provide education. So we have Right to Education Act, though that's been passed recently, though it is not properly implemented, but actually this is in the tune of following the directives that was suggested when our constitution was framed. Promote educational and economic interest of the weaker sections. In our country, there are many disadvantaged sections in the society. So it was said that actually states should try to promote educational and economic interest of the weaker sections, and accordingly state has framed various policies keeping these directives in mind. And to improve the level of level of nutrition and improve public health, that was health is another area. Apart from education, health is another area where policymakers should do something. And organizing village panchayats, like it was mentioned in the constitution that village panchayat should be organized, and that is being done mostly in our country. So what are the some major areas or main areas covered in the directives? One is equality, another is security of work, and another is education, and another is health and self-governance. Directives cover there are several directive principles of state policy. If we go through all these policies, the major points that emerge are this, that firstly, founders of our constitution, they thought having equality is very important. Everybody should there should be equality of opportunity in our country, and everybody should have some sort of security of work, or people should get employment, or people have some sort of security of work. Now, everybody should have access to education, which should be provided by the state, and everybody should get should be able to maintain proper health. They should get nutritious food, they should get proper treatment, and we should try to promote self governance. Okay. So, this is the these are the directive principles of state policy, and this document give us some idea about the social framework of social policy in our country. With this, we conclude this session. Thank you.